Welcome, everybody. It's episode 186. Jason's here. I'm here. The Grackles are here. They're coming into the windows.
Hopefully not.
All right, let's do our sponsor. Shout outs real quick, fatdna.com. In case you need to test for crypto, use code hashtag shithappens for $5 off the crypto panel. You never know when you might need it, and they offer lots of other testing too, including weird stuff. Mycoplasma, all the insane number of respiratory diseases turtles gets because turtles are disgusting. You know you might need it. Check it out, vetdna.com. Shane Kelley, spots on Xotics. He said his update was that he likes panther chameleons. I always love Shane updates. They're very good. So if you want to check them out, maybe he'll sell panther chameleons next year. They look like they're doing good. Very cute. Thank you. Bravo to the Ball Pythons. Eileen, she will be at Tinley with Chad Hulker Reptiles. I forget. Eileen, my brain's dead. Connolly Herps. That's what it was. At his table, selling some puzzle and clown pied stuff, and looking to get some muchachos together to get some Dominican red mountain boas, maybe. So check out her table at Tinley. Stoneage Ball Pythons, I don't know what he's doing still. I'm assuming hanging out with elk. That's my number one assumption. Justin, he's a Pacific Northwest ball python breeder, very busy, lots of overtime. So he's busy. Check him out, Stoneage Ball Pythons. Andrew at Powerhouse Pythons, he does ball pythons, rodents, gopher cocoa, stems as pythons, other fun stuff. I think his next show, is the Vancouver show on March 15th and 16th if you want to swing by and say hi. Thank you, Andrew. Oh, Chad is too cool. Gray Family Snakes, they'll be visiting Tinley, but not vending. So if you see them, say hi. And remember, check out grayfamilysnakes.com because it is cheaper there than if you were to buy it on Morph Market. It is the website discount. And Chris at BNS Reptilia, he will be at the March 16th Lehigh Valley ReptiFest show and the March 29th Gettysburg Expo. So check out Chris at BNS Reptilia for some stuff. And I think he had auctions up for Jani, maybe a bull, and something else, a Costa Rican boa. I don't know if those are done yet, but you'd always be checking the auctions for other fun things because they happen sometimes. And that's it. We did it. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
I'm glad you're excited.
Okay, good. That's a good place to start.
Yeah. The enthusiasm is literally 80% of the battle, I think.
Yeah, I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even every part of life, I'm going to be honest.
Yes,
also.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, introduce yourself to the audience.
Please. Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jason Crouch. I live in Missoula, Montana. My hobby name is Elevated Serpents. I am a lover of colubrids, and I mean, honestly, all reptiles, but specifically colubrids. And I have probably about 30 adult animals, and so I really selectively produce, 5 to 8 clutches a year, just depends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of my maximum based on my room and just my time and kind of tolerance level. So
how do you decide which ones to breed each year? Do you go like, oh, I had a hard time selling out fast enough last year of this species, so I'll just like...
Well, I think the reality is that I want to breed what I like. You know, I think like most hobbyists. And so for me, I'm always prioritizing the combinations that I want to see out of my animals and that excite me. And then I hope that other people get interested in that stuff. And some of the stuff, Baird's rat snakes, which are high on the list for me, one of my favorite animals, their popularity is, it's not extreme. And I think that it's tough because it takes a long time for those animals to change into their kind of glorious adult stage. And so it's really a long game with them as far as when you're holding back an animal, you're not going to know kind of how their adult coloration presents until, 3-4 years into the situation. So those are the animals that I gravitate towards. And so there's a lot of time kind of involved in this process for me.
So do you hold back beards longer on purpose? Like wait till they're 2 or something?
Yeah, I
Then...
think this year in particular, my female that I was most interested in, she double clutched from 2 different males, and the male that I'm most interested in the holdbacks from is a Loma Alta male, and so I'm really going to be holding back almost all those animals. I've let 2 go at this point in time, but I'm going to be holding back all of them to see which present with the coloration that I'm most kind of looking for and looking to replicate. Yeah.
Do you know, or do you have a personal experience or heard from a friend when during their ontogeny that people think they can sort of predict?
Yeah, that's
like
a good question. Yeah, I was actually kind of having that conversation through Instagram with another individual who loves bear eye, but I think that based on my, I'm going to say, limited experience with bear eye, okay, because it's a species that I didn't pick up until I guess 4 or 5 years ago, and so the hatchlings, I think that you can kind of garner some idea of how they're going to turn out as adults just based on their ventral coloration. If there's more extreme ventral coloration, my experience has been those animals tend to be brighter as adults, but it's really the 2 to 3 year mark, I think, and it's really 3 years because they continue to change even into adulthood. My female Loma Alta, she continues to change, and she's she's going to be 6 years old soon this year. So yeah,
it's hard. It's hard to make a selective breeding project on an animal like that.
It is. Yeah, I'm up for the challenge, but it is. Yeah.
Like Chlamydophora is like the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this can breed, and I still think it's not done. It's like 50% done in terms of the amount of blue it can ever get.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in the green animals from Climac, and so and talk about trying to put a breeding group together that is representing more of that green coloration. It's been difficult, to say the least. Yeah,
like there's a lot of phenotypes that I don't know if you could even find, particularly in like just like a pure emerald green is one, but also like the army green or even like the brown ones. Which some people be like, I don't want a brown one, but like maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not here to judge, right? Nobody really breeds them, and I don't know. It's hard. Life's hard.
It is. Yeah. Especially when those are the animals you like.
Did you go to the Missoula show as Northwest?
No, I did not. No, the show here tends to be pretty chaotic, and there's not a lot of vendors. And so I may try and go next year, but I did not go to the show this year. Yeah. I consciously chose not to.
Mostly sell online or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's been a struggle, like figuring out for me, like you're like, I like this, I think it's cool, but then it will never sell at shows because the target audience just isn't gonna figure it out.
And honestly, like, I mean, I like a mix, but I like the thing that comes out of the egg and you're like, oh, holy cow, look at that, that's so bright and beautiful. And so I work with some Hondurans where you're like, oh wow, right out of the egg. But that's not, like, for me, it's that process of watching the change that's most fascinating to me. And the same with Xotics, because they're born and you're like, oh, it looks kind of interesting, but then they just continue to change, and that's what I look forward to. But you're right, that's a really hard thing to market.
Yeah, even if you show them pictures and like fully convince them, they're like, there's so much like eye candy competition. They're like, well, I don't have to wait 3 years, I'll just buy a Honduran milk snake now.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, let's go back in time. How did you start keeping?
Well, I think it's like most keepers that I know, is that as a very young child, I was drawn, well, to all animals, really, honestly, but reptiles and amphibians in particular. I grew up in southern Indiana, and so we certainly had more kind of reptiles and amphibians than we do in Montana. And I distinctly remember there was a garter snake in our garden and my neighbor lost it and came over and cut its head off with a hoe. And I was
Great.
young, but like that had a profound impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually like emotional about the fact that this guy came over and killed this garter snake. And so I've always been drawn to snakes. I love them. I I think they're fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they're amazing animals. And so at a pretty young age, I think my first animal was a garter snake that I caught and brought into the home, into captivity, and
Mm-hmm.
kept him in I think it was a 20-gallon tank. And then I kind of, like everyone, started to expand my interest. My first python was a ball python, and it was a captive hatch from wild caught parents. There was, back in the 90s, there really was not much going on with the morph game at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of my first python. And then as I grew a little bit older, when I was about 18, I got a Burmese python and then a red-tailed boa. And so those are my first two kind of animals that were a little bit more serious as far as keeping was concerned. And those are the animals. I moved out to Montana when I was 19, and I actually put them in some pillowcases. I came out with a friend in his Grand Prix, and so I had two pillowcases, one with a Burmese python and one with a red-tailed boa. And we drove the many thousands of miles from Indiana to Montana. And so I kept those animals for quite some time. And then in Montana in about 1998, there was a small pet store here, back when we kind of had small pet stores, and there may be
Mm-hmm.
still some out there, but the box store thing wasn't a deal. And so I convinced my parents to help me purchase this pet store because it was something I was really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, honestly, I think it was like $5,000 to $8,000 total. It was
Mm-hmm.
more of an aquarium store, which I always loved aquariums as well. And so I bought this store really having no idea what I was doing, and but really loved every second of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that store failed, but what did happen is that store gave me the capacity to buy animals at wholesale and from wholesalers that I just didn't have
Mm-hmm.
um, any idea about. And when I think back on it, like some of these animals, like the Royal Diadem rat snakes that I had, I'm like, boy, I wish I still had those. I just had no idea at the time. So I owned this pet store for a couple years, and then I had some children, and the pet store was not sustainable from a financial standpoint. And shortly after that, we had the box stores kind of move in and blow up kind of the small
Mm-hmm.
pet store industry. Spent a lot of time raising some kids. I kept
Mm-hmm.
one or two snakes during that period of time, but was not really into the hobby, just because I had to focus more on raising children as it
Mm-hmm.
goes. And we had this one corn snake that I'd purchased from my daughter named Pinky, lived to be about 20 years old. And then after my kids kind of grew up, I really kind of got back into the hobby because
Mm-hmm.
I had more money. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And then I think that COVID really kind of pushed me further into it, because I was like, all right, well, I love this. I want to add to my collection. This is something I'm interested in doing. And so that kind of reignited things for me. So that's a very kind of brief outline of my beginnings all the way through now. Yeah.
So when you had the pet store,
Mhm.
do you feel like you were, Merrick with this, part of the hobby? Like, were you getting Reptiles magazine and like
Yep.
getting Priceless out of the back of it, and were
Yep.
like tuned in to like
Yep.
you?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I would get the wholesale list from Glade Herps in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time I even worked with some venomous. I was kind of going whole hog into the situation. Um,
Did you want
I
to be somebody, or were you like, I want to be
oh,
Pete Cole?
no, I just loved working with the animals. That was
Mm-hmm.
it, and that's kind of always been it. And I had this vague notion that I might be able to do this from a professional standpoint. I think the timing was really wrong for me in that the hobby that many years ago, between then and now, it has changed so drastically. And there was no morph market. There was no UV lighting as a standard. There was very little information online. I had to reference books like these, Milk Steaks by Robert Applegate, and A Color Guide to Corn Snakes, and this original one by Felipe de Vosgeli about ball pythons. And so I was trying to source information from everywhere, but it was tough. It was tough at the time because you didn't have as much access to information.
Do you think sometimes the hobby, no offense, no gatekeeping attended, is worse off because information is not tough to get in some ways?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately what I think is that information is a really good thing because it gives people access to a lot of hard-earned, kind of accumulated through the years information that's right at their doorstep, which can be really amazing. The problem is now almost is that there's so much information is that it's easy to get distracted, and you kind of need someone to refine it for you because some of the information that's out there is actually not good information. It's just information that's pulled from 1,000 different places or AI generated. And so
right.
I mean, I think that it's a little bit of both, honestly. I think there's some real positives, and I think that there's some negatives as well.
Yeah, I've a couple of times, I guess, lamented, I don't know, the fact that there aren't it's not quite like this, but thought leaders, just people who are like, I'm in charge of rosy boas, and here's my rosy boa website, and I do a rosy boa talk, and I just want to make sure everyone remembers all the morphs of rosy boas and where they were found. Yeah. And some people do that, but it's very disparate, and then all the stories get lost. But we used to have books, right? So all the rosy boa facts were in one book by a guy who knew, and everyone could reference the same material. Now we're all referencing each other's secondhand accounts or whatever, and I'm like, how do we maybe go back to that? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when people ask me for advice when it comes to animal care, what I really try and do is not overload them with information. What I try and do is give them the kind of basic tenets, the most important husbandry issues, right? Because there's so much information out there, I think people kind of drown in it to a degree. And social media is a positive and a negative as well. I certainly would never have met some of the people that I have met if I didn't have an Instagram account, and I refuse to do Facebook. It's just personally for me, it's not something that I engage in just because, I only have a limited amount of time.
It gives me anxiety. So you should be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think the answer is yes, but I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you kind of step back. I think the advancement of thinking about these animals as more intelligent and allowing for them to display some of those behaviors that are a little bit more interesting based on the enclosure size, based on providing, something that's closer to their habitat in the wild. I think that's a step kind of in that direction, but I don't know if that's the ultimate solution either. I mean, I think there will always be large scale breeders. And like any other keeper, I have some racks. I also have large cages. I have some bioactive cages. I try and mix it all essentially because I think that's the point is there's not one thing that works for every animal. Just like there's not one thing that works for every human being. And I think sometimes we get stuck in this thought pattern where, well, this is the best way. This has to be the best way. And that's not necessarily true. It just really depends on the animal and your experience with them.
Unfortunately, when the internet is so free, everyone can find the echo chamber that's right for them.
Absolutely.
And then we don't actually be nice to each other anymore.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that, though. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is, because, of course, you want to hear from people that think like you and that agree with what you're saying, but that doesn't ultimately always make it right. And I think that's where the knowledge that is so easy to access is kind of a mistake, because the knowledge that I had to kind of acquire through keeping animals for such a long period of time without some of this technology, it was very hard earned, and I made a lot of mistakes. Now,
Mhm.
I would say that the animal's welfare suffered to a degree because of that.
Mhm.
And that was the unfortunate kind of side effect. I mean, if you have an incandescent bulb and that's your only heat source, because that's the only thing that's really commercially available to heat an animal, well, of course, that's going to decrease the humidity in the environment, and then you're going to have issues with animals that require that humidity. And aquariums were kind of the only way to keep an animal, which aren't
Mhm.
great at retaining heat and all of those good things. So yeah.
Do you think a lot of people, like, I don't know, lament the commodification of reptiles and amphibians, and
Yep.
even like accounting for inflation? Lots of colubrids are more expensive now than they were 30 years ago, even if you correct for inflation.
Yep.
And so some people would like all snakes to be $20 and everyone to just keep it 100% hobby. But there are lots of benefits, like with uh, UV light and plant lights and material science products.
Yeah.
Do you think the trade off was worth it? Or
Mm.
are we.
I think that's a really good question. Um, I think that I'm a consumer like anyone else,
Mhm,
and I don't want to pay a whole lot for something. And
mhm,
so I don't know if that's why I gravitate towards animals that typically don't have a higher sticker price, but I typically price my animals at a price that I want to pay for them.
mhm,
And so and I think that's fair. And all that I'm really looking to do in these situations, for me personally, is to help pay for my hobby, because it's an expensive hobby. Food, for these animals is expensive. Electricity is expensive. Cages are expensive. Animal care is expensive. All these things, they add up. And so, like, uh, I don't know. I think it's both good and bad would be my answer. And I know that's kind of a cop out, I realize.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, well, I mean, there's obviously animal welfare issues with living things, animals being a commodity of some kind.
Yep.
But there was animal welfare issues when there was no resources to take care of them and no incentive to do a good job.
Yeah.
Also,
They will
so like,
always exist. Yes.
right.
Yeah. Those animal welfare issues, and you well know, I mean, you're a member of USARC, and how reptiles are automatically, people just don't really understand when you say, I have a room full of snakes. They're like,
Mhm.
whoa, you got to be crazy. What is your problem? But, if they have 5 cats, people are like, oh, you have 5 cats. That's cool. But like, animal welfare issues apply to every animal that humans choose to keep in some capacity. So,
Mhm.
and I don't think that's going away.
Right. And I think, I don't know, when people get too far forward with like the pro animal welfare so hard that it sort of rebukes the idea that humans should be allowed to derive pleasure from the keeping of animals. I started to get sort of weirded out, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's why I'm always like, well, it's supposed to be your pet. It's not supposed to be your child or whatever. And so
Yeah.
like there's a different standard here.
There's,
So,
yeah, absolutely, and the same standard applies. I love to hunt and fish, and live in Montana for a reason, and I love to do those things, and I love to fill my freezer with the meat that's hard earned, and feed myself and my family. Um, and it's the same concept, right, for people that are anti-hunting to a degree, in that and this will open a can of worms inevitably, but you're applying a very human set of an emotions to an animal that does not exist with the same standards. It just does not.
mhm.
The natural world is survive or die. essentially. And, I mean, I think about that with our snakes sometimes. I mean, like that corn snake that was my daughter's lived to be 21 years old, because it lived in a very controlled environment and was fed a high fat diet of lab raised rodents and had clean water. I don't think that most corn snakes in the wild live to the ripe old age of 21 because something's always trying to eat them, right? And so I think it devalues kind of what we do if we don't pay attention to the fact that we are the intervening principle in these animals' lives, whether we like it or not.
Right.
We are choosing to do this, and we are directing this movie, so to say. But I don't know. I think that's a tough thing, and I struggle with it. I struggle with it with what is my role in this? Is why do I have the right to bring these animals in and keep them in these captive environments? But I think the answer to that is, well, now at this point in time, especially, captive breeding has become such a thing that it's kind of a self-sustaining hobby. In the past, when I was coming up, I would say it was less. It was much more extractive.
Right.
Much more extractive.
Let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people are like, man, we should go back to shows the way they were in the late 90s. And I'm like, please no, actually. So I guess talk about like the kind of SKUs or inventory that you would bring in that you thought was like normal to sell to kids type inventory.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Savannah monitors were a really large ticket item. Terrible pet. I mean, you really have to provide some very large enclosures and some very strict parameters for them to be successful. And everybody always wanted to overfeed them and then they die, right? Liver disease or kidney failure or whatever the case may be. At the time, bearded dragons were just being captive hatched. And so that was always a large ticket item. Jackson's chameleons, believe it or not, were being imported in very, very large numbers at the time. And so that was also another very popular item. By the way, another very difficult animal to meet the care requirements for. And then ball pythons, they just weren't even a thing at that point in time, because I think they were a thing, but they were difficult to keep because most of them were imported. And so most people would bring in their imported animal, try and take it home as a pet, and it would die inevitably. But then also Colombian boas were huge. It's
crazy how many thousands we imported and then just kind of stopped.
Yep.
So if you're all wondering where all like the new boa morphs went, they went because we weren't importing them anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you ever sell iguanas, like ranched iguanas?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And talk about another terrible idea for a pet, right? Especially in Montana, where the environment is dry and montane. Like, this is a humidity loving lizard, right? And so and they were typically aggressive, these ranch lizards. That they were not some of these morphs that come out now that are kind of captive raised. They were a different animal. They were scary. One of the worst bites I've ever had is from a green iguana. So,
and were most of the colubrids you got were I'm sure some of them were like by the foot corn snakes and blue Florida garters and stuff, but what was like the inventory of like captive corn snakes and baby colubrids?
So it was pretty typical. It was either kind of a normal corn snake, a snow corn, or an albino form of corn. Some striped, some motley at the time, but that was still relatively kind of coming up. So it was the very kind of basics of the genetic barrel for corn snakes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember how much they wholesaled for then?
Yeah, I think that typically it was anywhere from $20 to $35.
Oh, that's pretty good, actually.
If you think about it for the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd take it.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Send me a message.
Yeah.
Were there any like remember before Pro Exotics sort of solved rhino rat snakes, where there was like bougie colubrids where it was like, oh, can't wait to figure out how to breed 100 flower rat snakes or whatever. Do you remember any sort of colubrid that was like a gold colubrid at that time for you?
Yeah, for me, and not knowing at the time, it was bringing in those diadem rat snakes,
The royal
and
ones?
the royal, yeah.
Hmm.
So that they developed that really black head, and they had that kind of amazing spotting throughout them. I just had no idea what I had at the time because it was on a list, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And I brought a group of those in. So that was not knowing essentially that market would be kind of essentially shut down. And then I remember distinctly when I went to a show in Spokane, and this guy at a table had a pair of patternless northern pines.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of blew my mind, and I bought them, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And now when I think back on that, I'm kind of like, for the time, that was way kind of ahead of itself.
Hmm.
And I have no idea where they came from. I don't know where they originated. And then unfortunately I sold them. But yeah, sorry, my dogs are being loud.
No, it's okay. We're into
Yeah.
dogs. It's
All right.
fine.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, I always wonder like if I had kept something better or there was more continuity where it would be now because I basically didn't have anything left
Mm-hmm.
for a while and then I came back later. So you think maybe the diadem rats would have been something you would have?
Yeah, I would kill to have them back.
Mhm.
And now, I mean, the ticket on them is it's expensive.
Yeah.
You're you're going to pay a lot for those animals. So there's definitely a few animals, and those patternless northern pines at the
Oh,
time.
look.
I wish I would have kept them. Oh,
Northwest Terraria says the northern pines were mine and came from Isis reptiles.
that is amazing.
Look, it's a connection.
That's the power of the internet right there.
Yeah, that's why the internet's worth
That's
it.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Northwest, do you still have pines? It's been a long time. Comment. Very cool. So do you think I think there are more kinds of captive bred colubrids available now than there have ever been before. Even if some of them are more expensive, we're like collectively better at producing them.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that or
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's honestly come kind of leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Barron's Racers, I mean,
Yes.
that's like it's kind of blowing up. And so, I mean, and they're amazing animals. And honestly, if I had the space, I would love to dip my toes in that because they're
Mhm.
really interactive and really fun. But I just don't have the space, so it's kind of a non-option.
Right. So I think a lot of people are I don't know, have the rose tinted glasses on, but a lot of times I'm like, almost in every way, things are better. It's just some countries close, some things we let fall through the cracks,
Yeah.
species wise.
Yeah.
But largely, we have like better choice, more captive bred, better housing, more
Yeah.
kinds of housing.
Yeah. It's amazing to me when an animal kind of falls out of grace within collections, and people stop propagating it, and then that market is shut off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happened, with quite a few animals, and I'm like, that's always unfortunate to me. So I kind of think about that sometimes. And it typically is because those animals are heavily collected for a period of time. But what drives that market and people's interests, I think it also changes from week to week, year to year, day to day. I'm just like,
Right.
I never know. So my philosophy has always been, I'm just going to continue to work with what I like to work with. And I hope that other people can appreciate these animals in kind of the same way that I do, even if it takes 3 to 4 years for them to show their true colors.
Yeah, I think largely, I think that's the right way because then you don't have to chase species or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's at least someone all the time making at least some of them somewhere for in perpetuity of the species.
Yeah.
Northwest says, no, the price got super high in Asia and I got a price I couldn't pass on. So those pine snakes went to Asia somewhere.
Yep.
Do you think Asia is a colubrid black hole? Because a lot of like the geckos went there and came back, but a lot of the colubrids that went there never really got re-imported back.
Yeah, I have no idea, honestly. I know that the market exists, and it seems like it's. I don't know. it is interesting that none of those animals kind of make it back, right?
Like I export not a decent, I don't know, some a year because they just see it on Morph Park. Like, I need this. I'm in Korea. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Buy, and then it just goes away.
Yeah.
Largely, they don't re-export back though so far.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, whatever. Doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
The European stuff does come back. Like if you send a corn
Yeah.
snake to Europe, they'll come back more often.
And that's kind of amazing too, because they tend to, I think, maybe think a little bit differently sometimes and produce a little bit differently. And so sometimes when I see those animals, I'm like, whoa, that's really neat. It's not a direction I thought that people were going to go with them. So yeah, that's always kind of cool.
Is there something that's not in the country right now that you would like? Perhaps.
I would like to see more leopard rat snakes, but I know that there are certain hobbyists that work with them in the United States. I just don't have any general idea on how many people, how many animals are actually in collections, and whether those people are trying to selectively breed them for, more color. But yeah, they're a neat species that I'd kind of like to see more of. Yeah.
I see them like occasionally.
Yep.
Maybe like every third show or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what a species need is like a bannerman, basically. Like, I'm going to be in charge of leopard rat snakes, and I'm going to talk about them way too much.
Yeah.
And then they can sell it to people. Those people don't have to be as aggressive with promoting it, but as long as they know that one person is like pretty good at promoting it, then like we can be sure it's there. But I've seen more than I thought there was. Like, I've probably seen 20 this year floating around.
Yeah, and again, it's just, and thankfully that is where kind of the benefit of the internet comes in, is some of these groups, you can actually meet people who are keeping those species that you wouldn't be connected with. And you're like, oh, like, there's an axanthic form of Baird's rat snake, and there's not too many of them out there, but I know they exist, and I know they exist because of social media, and that's the only reason I know they exist. And otherwise, I wouldn't know.
Do you know what locality produced them?
I do not. I think Tim Spuckler, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I think he has some. And maybe another individual has some as well. But that's kind of a weird one for me, because I love Baird Eye, but I don't know if I love what that gene does to Baird Eye. Because
is there a picture on the internet?
I think that there might be. Yeah.
Yeah, I like them with the little interstitial pink.
Yeah. So it's like actually kind of tough, and it's like the hypo for me too doesn't really do it for me in the Baird Eye, because it kind of washes that out. Now they can be really pretty, but
I like the hypo a lot, but it's like it reminds me of like a bubblegum black rat snake or something.
Yeah, pretty similar, right? Yeah.
You're like, well, I could have just got something else, but I have it just for like funsies. But like the metallic and pink is like where it's at.
I'd say the same about the albino kunashir, right? Because you're like, well,
boring. Hello.
Yeah, I'm like, what I like about that snake is that dynamic coloration that then you just completely kind of remove through.
Yeah. I charge exactly the same for either one, because I think it's a strict downgrade to make it albino. Which I kind of feel the same way about Flaviflora Mexican night snakes. Like, they have a sharp axanthic as a baby, but they both forms sort of yellow out, brown out real bad. You ever kept them?
No, I haven't. And it's some of the similar, kind of Asian rat snakes too, like the bamboos. They start out kind of amazing. And then as they mature, they kind of lose some of that. I'd rather have it the other way. I'd rather have it where they start out and you're like, oh, look at that gray snake. And then when it's 3 or 4 years old, you're like, holy cow, it's not gray anymore. It's gorgeous. It's got all these colorations. So
yeah, Trans-Pecos look good too.
Yeah.
Like they're axanthics in all of them pretty much. So yeah. All right. Is there any species you think people should have less of? You think they're overdoing it?
I mean, I'm gonna say it.
Just say it if you want.
Ball pythons, and here's the thing. I have one rescue ball python, and I love him. I think he's awesome. I've always loved ball pythons. And this is sticky, but the longevity of those animals too in captivity, they're not short-lived snakes, right? So the sheer volume of animals that we have in captivity is, I would love to get a general idea of what that is in the United States, but it's incredible. And so, and I think you're seeing the market, do what it's doing because of that, because of kind of an overcorrection, because of the total number of animals that were produced. And there's some amazing stuff out there. I'm not discounting that. I just think that it's too much. It's just
sometimes
too much.
I think, what about this theory? That there are people who are the hobby people, right? They like snakes, and they've always had different kind of snakes. They'll have one ball python, and they're having fun, and they just go through life, and they keep different things. And then there's another set of people called ball python people, which is actually like more than that. A lot of people, but like the amount of people in the hobby is more now, but there's just like this big like demographic bulge of just ball python people who aren't actually replacing just normal hobby people who keep whatever species catches their interest or whatever. They're just in addition to.
Yeah. It would be interesting to know what percentage of animal keepers in the United States consider themselves, ball python breeders or keepers.
Right.
And I think it would be a pretty large percentage, which again is a really good thing, just I think because of the exposure to the hobby. But for me, it's too much. And honestly, the reality is for me is that morphs and genetics and extreme morph combinations just aren't my thing anyway. And I don't know, I know what I like in corn snakes, I like gray corn snakes. I've always loved gray corn snakes, and I like gray with some other form of color mixed in with that gray. And yeah, I have to understand the basics of genetics, even though it kind of even fail at that, if I want to produce more of those. But like it is gone to the nth. It's just crazy. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Even within corn snakes, the genetics are just incredible. I cannot keep up. I cannot keep up.
Yeah. I mean, I think in corn snakes, it's pretty well known that if you have too many, loci that are homozygous for something dumb, it doesn't look that good anyway. I feel like that's like.
Yeah, it almost tends to kind of dilute the animal, right?
Yeah, it looks like raw chicken. I'll just go ahead and say it. It's not that good.
Yeah. I think that just throwing too many genes at something sometimes doesn't actually get the desired result. Yeah.
Right. So ball python people are like relearning that now, I think. Yeah. So I don't know.
I think that's ultimately a good thing too, right? Because I think what's going to come out of that is hopefully some really select kind of animals that really blow you away from a visual appearance standpoint. I mean, Canova. I mean, they're doing stuff with ball pythons. It's out of this world. It's unbelievable. But they're, kind of on this pedestal of their own within that.
Their own, like separate.
Along with some others, but yeah.
Like as a Colubrid person, do you feel sometimes people feel like replaced by ball python people? They're like, I need content for me or space at the show for what I want. But that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's two different hobbies. It's not trying to replace you. It's like there's almost like two different trajectories. So like, don't feel replaced. Be the voice you want to hear in the hobby.
Exactly. And that's why, I think that's kind of easy for me because that's what I like. And so that's what I'm going to keep. And even if it doesn't have a high market value, like an Okiti corn snake, but for me, it's like, well, within Okitis, there's a huge variation. Some look great. Some don't look so great. I'm interested in the ones that look really great. And they look great to me, that when I look at them, I'm like, wow, that's so cool, And so then I just hope that other people think the same way. And I think that with colubrids, it is it is gravitating in that direction. I mean, look at Colubrid Fest. Look at
Mhm.
I think that it is. I think people are like, okay, ball pythons, and let's be honest about them as well. It's the least interesting snake in my collection because it's active when I'm asleep and almost not active ever when I'm awake. And so, whereas the colubrids, when I go into the room, they're almost always interactive.
Mhm.
They're up, they're about, they're kind of doing their thing. And so I think people are kind of keying into that and being like, I'd like to maybe have an animal that I can interact with a little bit more and that isn't just
Mhm.
a quote unquote pet rock.
Jennifer gave a super chat and then thought about taking it back. Thank you, Jennifer, because we talked about ball pythons too much. But thank you, Jennifer, for the $20 super chat. No, it's not. I think the antagonism is not real, really, and I think a lot of the people can just like whatever they want to like and talk about it wherever they want to talk about it. But if
Yeah.
you want somebody to like your weird rare species, you have to tell them something about it somewhere to convince them, in my opinion. Because
Yep.
even if it's super attractive, people don't know what they don't know.
No, you do have to show it, and there's a little bit of work involved with that, with social media. And I mean, like I post not as often as I should, right? But when it's summertime and I'm taking a Baird's outside and I'm putting it close to that camera, you can tell. You're like, holy cow, what is that? And so I think that gets people thinking maybe, whoa, I didn't even know that was something that was out there. I might be interested in that. And so I hope that just that information kind of helps people kind of get into things that they're maybe wouldn't normally be into as far as animals are concerned.
Do you have, you guys said Loma Alto, do you have other localities?
Yeah, I sold my male that was and here's the thing, I didn't have locale information on that male, and I think if I had to take a guess, he was an intergrade between a Mexican locale and a Texas locale. Now, but between which and exactly where, it's almost kind of impossible to tell unless you know or have information about where the animal came from. It's really difficult with Baird eye to track that down too. It can be kind of frustrating. But so what I'm leaning more towards is how does the animal visually present, and those key characteristics kind of lean more towards the Mexican, obviously, or the Texas varieties. And then within Texas, even kind of those geographical areas are different between adult species there too, and that coloration. So
yeah, I mean, I'll be going with Jennifer shortly in May to West Texas, so I'll let you know.
Awesome.
Which ones are the best? Really,
awesome.
Everyone I've talked to down there is like, yeah, they all look like shit. Actually, what you got in the hobby's way better. So
well, and there's definitely something to that. I mean, I think some of the selective breeding that have been done by Vivid Reptiles or Sunshine Serpents, that they were really taking those best traits and kind of putting them back together again, and then you get these animals that just present with that more coloration.
Yeah. We already picked the best, so
yeah. Here's Manuel.
What's up? Thanks for coming. Jolly, what's up? Ball, I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for balls. I like balls. I just I want peace in paradise is what I want. Like sometimes I'm like, I think Steven was like, there should be 50% of a reptile show should be ball pythons. And I'm like, that's from your perspective because that's the only thing you care about. Then I'm like, what percent would bring peace on Earth? 30%, 20? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I do think it's about educating. I think there's this. I don't know. There's been a lot of time and energy spent on saying that ball pythons make really good pets, and, or very good beginner snakes, and that's not my experience with them. Hold on, these dogs are driving me crazy. Sorry. So anyway, I think that kind of moving away from that narrative, saying that yes, they can be a really good snake, but here are some requirements that you will have to meet in order for them to be healthy and live a happy life. That humidity thing with them is something that I think novice keepers really miss, because they don't know how to maintain it, or they put them in a glass enclosure with a screen top. And whereas a corn snake, to a degree, it's going to be fine either way.
Mm-hmm.
You put it in a low humidity environment, it'll probably be okay. It'll probably have fine sheds, just depending. So, yeah.
What do you think the best colubrid proxy for a ball python is? I don't even know. Sometimes I'm like Neurodia, like a captive-fed Neurodia are really nice actually, and they're fat and they have fat heads. Because there's something about the shape of a fat animal being fat that is important to new people.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, I mean, a blood python wouldn't work because that's it's its own thing too.
They want them to be fat. Yeah. And you're like, well, hognose are kind of fat and chunky, but they're like
they can also be a little bit spicy, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. I got to move this dog.
All right.
Okay. Come here.
Quirky says, I'm glad I can say hot sluts near you in the chat. Yes, you can. At this chat, you can. A good boo viper is the proxy for a ball python. Absolutely. For sure.
Nice.
Also, we're doing advertising for the Golden Dragon Adult Entertainment Club. I'm kidding, sort of, but not really. Check it out. It's in Oregon. One day I will own a Chinese buffet converted into a strip club, and I'm going to be...
Goals.
Yeah, I will lord over that place. It's going to be awesome. Sorry.
That's okay.
What are we talking? Oh, beards. Do you think there's a species that's like... Sometimes I like North American species, but they have a severe like handicap in North America because they're like, ugh, I can go get one in my yard. And I'm like, no, you can't. Actually, it looks totally different than the one in your yard because it's from 1,000 miles away. But they don't think about it that way.
Right.
Have you like experienced that, or you're like, no, I'm not worried about it? It's because sometimes I'm like, I just need Asian stuff because they think it's exotic because it sounds Asian. It's like, and it's legal in every state, and I'm like, well, whatever.
I mean, I think that there's certainly more variability within the Asian species, or less commonality, I guess, is the way that you kind of just said it. And so it tends to excite people a little bit more because it's just not something they're seeing as much of. Although I think that's changing because they're becoming more popular and you're seeing more and more of them in captivity. And again, for me, like, I think the North American species appeal to me because it's what I grew up with as a kid.
Like, does it make sense? Black rat snakes are $50 or $30 or whatever.
Yeah.
People will pay $400 for.
Yeah.
I don't know, like whatever, a carinata or something. It's still just a big black snake in the end.
Like, yeah, and I don't know.
I feel like being Asian.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also that's just because they're kind of popular in their own way at this point in time.
I mean, they are cool.
They are super cool. And honestly, that's, another kind of track that but the problem is, like, for me, what appeals to me is like a Taiwanese beauty snake, and they're probably have the lowest market value of most of those Asian rat snakes, which is kind of hilarious. But to me, they're the prettiest.
Do you like Grabowski?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah, they are pretty cool.
I like all of them. I'm just like, I just have like a racer snake problem. I'm like, oh god.
like just like a black racer snake problem.
There's all racers and bills.
There are.
So I'm like,
yeah.
I grew up with black rat snakes, so like my preferred colubrid snake build is like a rat snake form. So like a loaf of bread, and it got a handsome head. It's not too excessive.
Yeah.
And it holds on to you when you hold on to it.
Yeah.
So boas do that. Carpets do that. All those things fit that model. So that's like what I'm most attracted to. So when something has the body of a black racer, I'm like, just going to fling poop at me and fly out of my hands. And
well, there is that part of it too, is many of those Asian rat snake species aren't the most friendly animals in captivity either.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And I don't mind if something's trying to take my head off, but after a while it gets kind of old, right? You're like, okay, yeah.
Is that a good predictor of when something will sort of fall out of fashion? Like if it's not actually that great of a pet because it's a poo flinger. but it
Yes.
is popular for a while with enthusiasts. But then
Yes.
it hits some sort of critical maximum of breeding, and
Yes.
then like when it goes time to sell to the public's like,
Yeah.
nah.
Yeah, I think the tolerance level for that with the public is pretty minimal, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
if you're a serious hobbyist, then you're like, okay, well, I can put up with that, and I know this animal's going to be pissed at me every single day that I try and interact with it. But if you're just, somebody looking for a pet snake, that's a bad idea.
Right. So I don't know. Like even though Blue Beauties and all this other stuff has its like time to shine, I'm like, we could be overwhelming the hobbyist demand side of it too fast at this point.
I don't know. I can't speak as intelligently about it as I would like to, but my impression is that those animals take longer to sell. Just because there's less of a demand, and I think there's less of a demand because they are more difficult and don't maybe make the best pets.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people will like. I guess if you're going to evangelize a species, make it a really good pet too, and then like, I mean, you can evangelize the weird ones for hobbyists to like, advanced hobbyists, but like sometimes I'm like, oh god, they're trying to replace ball pythons with Carinata. No, it's the stinking goddess. Don't do it.
Yeah. I remember asking specifically a breeder about him, and I was like, listen, I just have to know, is it true that they're kind of can be as stinky as people say? And he's like, oh, 100%. They absolutely can.
I wonder what they smell like.
I don't know.
Smelled one?
I'm super curious. No, I have not, but I'm also like, well,
here's a weird question for you. Yeah. So weird. Whose snake musk do you like the best? And go.
Oh, I'm fond of the bear dye because when they're hatchlings, they almost always musk on you, or at least mine do. And so I don't mind it. I'm not a fan of the Honduran milk snake musk.
What does that smell like?
It doesn't smell as kind of sweet as a bear dye. I know, and this is a strange conversation. You're right.
I'm so into it though. You don't even know.
Yeah. Okay. It's to me, it smells a little bit more sour, and I don't know. Maybe it's this thing where my brother has a ferret, and they love that thing. And the smell of ferrets, I'm like, man, nope, not my thing. But my wife is like, oh, I love the smell. I think it's amazing. And and it turns out biologically, I guess, like humans, you either kind of have that smell sensor where you're like, you think a ferret smells good, or you think it smells bad. So I don't know.
Awesome. I know some people are like, yeah, I'm really into like the smell of gas, which I'm like, don't smell that, by the way, gives you brain damage. But or like cleaning. Touch my cord.
It's okay.
I think bear and I smell a lot like the rest of the genus, but corn snakes don't smell like them. Like Paradise smell more like Obsoletus or Elegansis or whatever version of black rat snakes are now. Like black rat snakes smell like burnt rubber in a good way. So Paradise smell like more like them. But I'm like, I always heard like Western Diamondback smelled like cucumber. So now I want to know what everybody smells like. I'm just always
maybe somebody should develop scratch and sniff for every snake species out there.
How fun would that be?
That I would buy those stickers. I'm a big enough nerd. But
you ever been herping and gotten a whiff of like black rat snake musk or something and just been like, if I was a bloodhound, I know I could find it.
Yeah. I remember water snakes musking on me as a kid too. And
that's distinctive too.
Yeah, like being like, I'm not really into that. That smells pretty nasty. Yeah.
So I guess if anybody knows what Carinata smells like, please don't leave in the chat.
But you have to associate it with something that's like a common smell, which might be an impossible thing to do, right?
Yeah, I guess that is hard.
Because you mentioned burnt rubber, and I'm like, that's funny. I don't really get that, but I don't know what I get. I can't.
I think
I can't explain it.
Black rats smell more like that than bear dye do, but they're the bouquet profile of the bear dye is similar to that than it is to other ones.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're talking about now.
It's okay. You know, it's part of it. My dog loves that smell, by the way. Like, so if I'm in the room and he smells it, he'll come in and he'll start doing this kind of air roll where he's like, "Oh, that smells good." And I'm
What
like,
breed of dog is he?
he's a shepherd cross with like many different shepherds. So
Have you ever tried to scent train him?
No,
You want to?
I don't know. I don't
could
think there's
find
enough
missing
snakes in
snakes for you.
Montana. That's the problem, you know.
Oh god. So I did wood turtle research and I have a dog. I was like, surely this dog will be motivated.
Yeah.
No.
No.
I was with her for years, right?
Yeah.
She just wasn't like a very scenty, interested dog. She just wanted to walk around the woods with me. And the turtles don't even run away. And I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of papers where Cocker Spaniels did it for years. And what are you doing? I have to do manual search. And you just walk around behind me.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be able to train my dog to find snakes. Yep.
So I'm always like, I want a German short hair pointer, and I'm going to teach it to like point sight at snakes. So I don't have to do any work anymore.
That would be pretty amazing.
I know, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And you don't want it to go up and like rush a rattlesnake or whatever. But if it just pointed out,
yeah,
you flush it.
Yeah.
Win-win. Montana's cold. Do you like to go outside though? Do you like to run around, look for stuff in the summer?
Yeah, it's usually when I'm out and about doing something else, like when I'm fishing or hunting. In eastern Montana, I usually run into rattlesnakes. And we have some rubber boas here, but they are very, very few and far between, or at least extremely secretive. And also, there's a lot of country, so they're really difficult to find. We have some garter snakes, a really cool kind of red and yellow checkered subspecies of garter snake that tends to live in specific kind of geographic areas. Those are kind of cool. But yeah, we have some bull snakes and some racers, and that's really about.
Can you collect legally in Montana?
Yeah, you can.
If you wanted to.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know. It would be maybe you find something cool. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, who wants to go through like the work of worming it?
Right.
For whatever. But
plus a wild snake bringing it in and like, trying to get it to eat and, all those other things. I'm like, and, it's worth mentioning that like, I also keep species that I know are going to do okay in Montana. And obviously I'm not keeping these animals outside, but like our house, just because it's in Montana, is probably not the best house for emerald tree boas. Right, because it's typically 60 in the winter in our house, and it's dry. We live in a really dry environment, and so I kind of have to keep animals that I know, at least to a degree. Yes, they're in their own room, and yes, in their own cages, and yes, I can kind of dictate their environment a little bit. But I'm also like, I need animals that are okay with that. So for me, it's really. Colubrids kind of fit that piece really well. And I don't know if the Asian species would. Some of them would. I think like the Diones, is that how you pronounce them? Yeah. I think they would probably do really well in Montana. Russian rat snakes would probably do really well.
The Climax would do good.
Yeah, and the Climax do great. Yeah.
Quirky says, gray-banded king snake mucks smells like tatami flooring. Very specific.
That is extremely specific. That's amazing.
Let's go smell Japan and then we'll check in.
Yeah.
Eileen likes ferrets, so that's pretty good. Nice. Splendida musk is the worst.
That's funny. Mine's never actually musked me.
Yet.
I have a very, very nice speckled king snake that has never musked me.
Isn't that Holbrook?
Oh, Holbrook, yeah.
Holbrook guy?
Yeah. Holbrook guy.
Splendida's desert kings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. King snake taxonomy anymore. They ruined it.
I know. Everything's divided out and complicated.
Well, it's like, and then they lump it back. And then I'm like, is that even still a species anymore? And they're like, no.
I don't know. It's funny how most of us just hold to kind of the old classifications, right?
Right, but I think that's like a cognitive bias, not an actual like real position we're taking on the taxonomy.
No, it's not based in science. Yeah,
we're just like, I don't feel it changing.
Yeah, it's
It
just
was
based
good
on
enough when
tolerance.
I was born, so it's good
Yeah.
enough now.
Right. Yeah.
Because like I don't know, people will take stands on taxonomy, and I'm like, bro, yeah, you're just mad. You have to learn something new, mostly.
Yeah.
There are integrates between Holbrookii and Splendida. I just want to know if Niagara is still real. I don't think it is. I think it's all Holbrookii now.
Yeah.
Just bullshit, by the way.
Yeah.
They like physically look very similar, so it's fine. But
yeah, I think what they'd probably integrate in like eastern Texas.
Yeah, and eastern Oklahoma, Louisiana, like that area is like an integrate point.
I would guess, yeah.
Like what is here is supposed to be Splendida, like where I live, but they look kind of dark. So then you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there anything? So you only have a couple clutches a year, but you have 30 adults. Are you picking and choosing adults to breed that are ready to breed technically?
Yeah, and in fact, like my Baradai female double clutch last year, and so she's taken the year off. My black milks are 4 years old, and I don't think they're ready to go. I've grown them pretty slowly because I don't provide intense, hot spots for them, and I feed them what I think is appropriately. But and so I breed the animals I think are ready. I think one of my corn snakes is ovulating right now, or may have even retained sperm from last year. I felt what I thought were eggs in her when I had her out like last week. So, but yeah, I just, and honestly, it's also based on how many hatchlings I have. And I don't like to sell hatchlings until they're really well established on frozen thawed. I think it just makes everyone's life easier. And then if I have too many hatchlings, I'm likely not to breed as much.
That's good.
Yeah. It's just my capacity, I guess, my carrying capacity.
Right. I feel like there probably should be more people like you who are just like, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. So I don't need to breed every year to catch up or something. I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
And then you'll be incentivized to make the right amount.
Yeah.
And let animals take breaks.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think for me, this is not my profession. I'm a social worker. And so like, I want to have fun. I don't want it to be, and it's work, as you well know, even if you have a moderately sized collection, it's work. It's a ton of work, but I want that work to be fun and I want to enjoy it. And I feel like if I tried to kind of push that and if I had trying to hit a max clutch rate every year, it just wouldn't be as fun for me.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. It keeps it a hobby instead of a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with it being a job too, by the way. I want to clarify that. I mean, I think it's amazing when you could do that. And I think sometimes you run the risk if you take something that you love and you turn it into a job, you start to love it less and it becomes more like a job, right? And I just don't ever really want to get there with that. I just want it to be fun and something I enjoy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a job for me, but sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? Right? Like, I could just do less and probably it'd be easier. But like, because there's a point where you're making animals to sell, but you have to sell them to make them, and there's just like self-fulfilling like treadmill of like, if you just didn't make so many animals, you wouldn't have to like do as much work to sell them.
Yeah.
So like you have to decide at some point, like, how many animals do you really need to make to do whatever you're trying to do, selective breeding, rise, or whatever. Like I have this problem with corn snakes, right?
Me too.
I like corn snakes. They make $1 million. I like $1 million. I want $1 million.
Yeah.
But it takes effort to sell them. It's not like.
Yeah, that market in particular seems to be. I guess, really saturated, and that's kind of what you're talking about. And so
I don't know if it's saturated. Like it feels like there are just an X number of people that want a corn snake for whatever reason, even though they would be just as happy with something else, like another colubrid. They just think a corn snake is not cool, so they'll just pick
cool.
any other colubrid.
Yeah.
And so, like, let's say there's at a reptile show, there might be 200 colubrid sales at the whole show. 50 of them are earmarked for corn snakes, hypothetically. The 150 is the rest. Like, the enthusiast is rarely picking the corn snake because they think they're like basic or something. Even if they're a very cool morph or whatever, they just don't see it that way. They're like, I just want a new species. I'm going to go get a Mex or whatever. And so they just pick that because it's just not a corn snake.
Yeah. They suffer from being, I think, labeled a beginner snake.
Yes.
For a long, long period of time. And so to your point, I think people are like, well, I need something different. I want to advance or move on. Where you can with corn snakes if you start getting into kind of the genetics and trying to produce something a little bit different. Yeah.
Right. And so I actually don't think there are too many corn snakes. It's just, I mean, maybe I guess there are in a way, but like you can be the only corn snake vendor at a show with 100 tables. And I think you have brought too many corn snakes because the market there might be to sell 10 corn snakes that are just to pet people, because you cannot convince someone that like this is a slightly nicer line of Okati that deserves a price premium.
Yeah, to your point, I haven't even posted my Okatis yet because I'm like, listen, I'm going to give them more time to develop and then be like, hey, listen, this Okati right here is really amazing. And so it's, kind of one of a kind, but like, yeah, there's so many out there that I think, to your point, people are just like, well, it's hard to convince them that this one is so much more special than the other one.
Right.
That's out there.
And then it sounds weird because like, there just aren't that many corn snakes out there, like realistically, like competing. But the demand does not meet the sheer fecundity of a bunch of people doing a bunch of like side pairings of corn snakes and then putting on their table for $35, and like enthusiast corn snake breeders and wholesalers all sort of putting pressure on a show. I end up selling like most shows 3 to 5 corn snakes. Even if I bring 60 or whatever. And they're mostly the cheap, pretty ones.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But online, someone's like, oh, I can look at all the pictures of the whole clutch. That one catches my eye. You're much more likely to convince another enthusiast online.
Yeah. And especially if they're interested in like going one way with a corn snake, one path, one kind of gene train, Yeah. Which for me is primarily cinder and lava combinations. So yeah,
they're crazy.
I know.
I think so. I have a lava shatter, and it is so like indistinct and blurry.
Yeah. Well, do you talk about actually trying to get this underlying kind of pink hue under the cinder to show through in a photograph? Good luck. It's almost impossible. Like, but I can see it, with my naked eye. It's just I don't know. And the lava female that I have that's had cinder, I also don't know. There might be something else going on with her.
Is she from Dawn?
I don't know. It was from BS Hare Auctions.
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe still from Dawn though.
Maybe because they sell from kind of everywhere.
Right.
But like I saw it as a hatchling on there and I was like, there's something unique about this animal. And so
is she masked?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know how that goes. You're kind of like, well, I don't think so. I'm not positive, but she just presents in a way that I haven't seen in that combination before. And her offspring are also presenting in the same, which is, I was hopeful that they would. And I have a couple of those held back that I'm like, I'm really hopeful that will continue the way she kind of presents.
Right. I feel like corn snakes, no offense, other colubrids, are still the snake with like the most selective breeding potential. Where like you
Mm-hmm.
have a couple, you can pick a couple of recessives and just really explode the direction you want to go to. Like we have
Yeah.
so much sort of availability genotypes to pick out of in the captive hobby right now. If you have a goal, you can do it. It's just we have to sort of re-institutionalize like breeding corn snakes as an art instead of table filler.
Yeah. Just a quantity. That kind of
Right.
situation. Right. Yeah.
Which I think is hard
Yeah.
because they are easy to breed. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And they typically lay a lot of eggs.
Well, sometimes, like if you have really big ones, they will.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep mine fairly small, so my
Yeah.
average clutch size for corn snakes is probably 12 to 15.
Hmm.
And I try not to double clutch a lot of them if they look bad. Sometimes they'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I know. I did not try to double clutch that specific female last year, but there she went. I was like, okay, guess you're doing it.
Yeah, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm still hopeful someone will wake up one day and be like, yeah, corn snakes.
Remember corn snakes?
Yeah, because it's, I don't know. I still think there's a relationship between how much there are captive farms and people's perception that they're overbred. So like Petco and PetSmart have whatever contracts for corn snakes and need 20,000 a year or whatever. And so they seem extremely common because you see them on Craigslist as like a rehoming from whatever.
Often.
Yeah, but those aren't hobby produced corn snakes because we just don't have that many at shows. I promise.
Yeah.
We don't have that many. We don't sell that many.
No.
So all of that sort of overburden of like rescue corn snakes needing rehoming isn't because of like as a byproduct of trying to make a really pretty okatee. It's because someone has a contract to fill and they need a skew at Petco.
Yeah, I wish sometimes that they weren't allowed to sell snakes, but wish in one hand, do something out there and see which happens first. I just think that will continue, but I agree with you. It's it's unfortunate. Yeah,
but they are still cool though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. My gosh, is there any corn snake morph you want to work more with?
Well, I thought that I really wanted to work with some Ultramel stuff, but I'm thinking I don't. And I think it's just because other people are. It's kind of I guess market or that sector of corn snakes has been captured, and people are doing some amazing stuff with Ultramel. And also, there's this little part of my brain that says, well, it's not a true corn snake. There's some other influence in there too. And that's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement, but that part of my brain says, well, maybe you shouldn't do that because technically, they're not actually a pure corn snake, but whatever.
I don't know if any corn snake's a pure corn snake.
Exactly. That's the other part I was going to say is like, certainly, some of these other genes may not be pure corn snakes as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't fret that at all. Because like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna personally do? Go back in time and shoot the guy who maybe had an Ultramel on his table and saw a gray rat snake in the bushes and thought it was...
Yeah. I like the palmetto gene. I really am interested in how you can maybe work that bug-eyed nature out of them, and
I doubt it.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that is something that's just going to continue to be part of that gene combination, but I sure love how they look.
Yeah, when they are on point, they slap for sure. The eyes are in the head and they have like a good distribution of color.
Yeah.
And like the eyes are maybe like blue with like some speckles around it. They look really great.
Yeah.
It's just some of those like apocalyptic little babies.
I know. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Somebody tried to like trade me a wholesale lot of bug-eyed palmettos, and I just like would generally entertain people, but the answer is really always no. So
Yeah.
But I was looking at it, I'm like, I can't stop it. I was just like puking in my mouth a little bit. They're just like,
Yeah.
sorry.
I feel bad for them. I know. Every time I see one posted, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
Right? Does it hurt? Do you think it hurts?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
it sure does look goofy.
Gross. Hashtag gross.
Yeah.
All right. People were asking about house snakes. You don't live somewhere where house snakes would probably do good in your house. What do you?
No, nope. And that's another market that I think is really kind of blowing up. But they also don't interest me as much, and I think they're not quite big enough for me. You know,
You like them girthy?
Yeah, I kind of do. You know, I like a little bit of substance to my colubrids. You know, and they're going in some amazing directions, but I don't. Yeah, I don't think they do as well in Montana or in my room too as I'd like them to be. And also, I mean, all the animals in my room, aside from the ball python, I need them to go through brumation in my room, and so,
okay.
So there's some.
You could just like turn the heat off to the whole room.
Yeah. So the heat just goes off to the whole room. It's dark, and I typically don't brumate at extremely low temperatures either. And I find that works. I also don't really incubate with a ton of heat. So I incubate in the room on a top shelf in a styrofoam cooler that has a backup bit of heat tape in there in case it dips down too low. But and so that incubation typically goes a little bit longer for those hatchlings than they would if they were at 83 degrees or whatever. But so I my room kind of needs to work for everything that's in there aside from the rescue ball python.
Would you consider pythons that act like colubrids?
Yeah.
Like womas or blackheads or breadlife that could be cooled.
I think they are really neat, and of course, like a diamond python, that would be really amazing. But that's not in the financial cards, as they say, And that's the other part of this for me too. Is like I know what I like to pay for snakes, and so that's kind of what I like to charge for them. And some of these snakes, they just there's just too much. I just won't spend that money on them. I'm like, no, I can't. It's not my cards.
Yeah, I guess I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
If I want it, I'm in.
You're getting it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I spent like $650 on a male Miami Tessera. Just because I thought it looked really good.
Yeah.
Oh, and Mic Drop.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Mic Drop was 600 something too.
Yeah, and that's within, in my mind, an acceptable kind of parameter. When you start talking, a couple grand, especially for a colubrid, I just, and God, these blue barons now, I mean, they're going for, a large sum.
Yeah, I don't like raining on people's parades in terms of pricing, really. Gosh, but like sometimes I'm like, there's a price point where it starts to become investmenty, and then it's not really about people like, I don't know, keeping the species going. They're trying to like get an ROI, and then it sort of changes the perspective, which can be fine in a lot of ways. I think a lot of colubrids are still inflated artificially from COVID sort of spikes.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll stay that way. I don't know.
But I don't know either, but it is funny because it doesn't seem that some of those prices have been moderated, and and that's okay. To your point, like, you do you, absolutely. And if you can get that for that animal, that's amazing. But what I also see sometimes is people like being very stubborn and not willing to kind of negotiate on price. And then they have the animal for a long period of time because they can't sell it. And for me, that's not effective. It's not the way I want to do it.
Eileen asked a question. Would you like the colubrid of boas, the Dominican red mountain boa, or any of the insular boas?
Uh,
She's evangelizing in the chat, so.
yes. I really like the Dominican red boas. I think they're amazing looking animals. Again, that's an animal that fetches a price that was probably out of what I'm willing to pay for an animal. The only other thing I think about that is like, if you keep animals long enough, stuff happens too. Animals die.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you're investing that sum of money in an animal and something happens, because it does, because it's inevitable, and they die, whoa, boy howdy, that would be a bad day. And
Mm-hmm.
whereas with more moderate, it still sucks investment animals, but like, you're not like, oh gosh, how am I gonna, pay rent or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, it's fine, and then sometimes I'm like, some people are clearly over leveraging to invest because they think they're making a business, and
Mhm.
that's fine. But then they're putting on a credit card, so they're buying on leverage, a living thing that can die.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Risky.
yeah, and it's just like maybe not good for your mental health. Like, wouldn't it be more fun not to do that?
Yeah. And I,
and
and I
not,
think from my perspective, coming from like the retail side of things and having a pet store and be involved in that, like I kind of probably went the opposite direction as far as I really just want to do again what I love to do, and I hope that other people can see that, and then if they like it, I can share it with them. But
Mhm.
like if you get too kind of sucked into the following the money, it's just it takes the fun out of it for me too. And
Mhm.
I don't want ever for that to go away.
Do you have bull snakes?
Nope.
They're girthy.
They are. They're also kind of messy.
Hmm. But they're like, I don't know,
They're
big.
awesome. They really are. And for me, it would be the Kankakee. That's the one for me. That's the only one that I would really be interested in. I'm not so interested in the morphs of the bull snakes. But I also am very I don't like it when there's poop in my snake's enclosures. And
Hmm.
so I'm constantly in there and constantly cleaning. With bull snakes. They require more cleaning for sure.
Even if it was bioactive, you wouldn't want like a big bioactive.
That might be cool.
Let's just show some pictures for fun. What's your favorite Kankakee like
I like the
type?
ones that actually have less of the tricolor and more of the straight kind of black. So black and yellow. Yeah.
Like that one?
Wow, that's money.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that does it for me. I don't know why.
No, it's like high contrast and fun.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yep.
My
Yep.
problem is they are big, so like
Mm-hmm.
I would need lots of
Space.
things.
Yeah, space too.
They are like very, I don't know, assertive or something in
Hmm.
like a.
I kind of like that. It's like the pine snakes too. They're loud. They're gonna let you know all the time. Those patternless northern pines, they literally like would not shut up when you were engaging with them. They were constantly blowing air, and that was kind of fun. And they
Mhm.
never bit, but it sure was kind of for people that didn't know or that didn't like
Intimidating.
snakes. They're like, "What in the world is that?" Yeah, yeah.
There's something about them that's like, I don't know, dinosaur like the way their
Hmm.
face is shaped.
Yeah, they've got that kind of rostral, right,
Yeah, it
scalation,
looks
right,
like a
for the digging and
stegosaurus or
yeah,
something.
burrowing. Yeah.
I I say that with love, by the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they're amazing. Again, for me too, it'd be a space thing. That'd be tough.
Did you ever have like wild caught at the pet store rough green snakes a lot?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Interesting.
Yeah. We did bring in at the time wild caught green tree pythons, and
Did they
um,
make it?
yeah, I patted myself on the back for that one several times because they were emaciated, they were dehydrated, they were literally in terrible shape, and
Mhm.
the only way I could get them to feed is I had yellow finches in the store, and at night I would have to cover the cage in a towel and then introduce like the yellow finch, and I finally got them to eat that way, which was kind of crazy. And then both of them I got to eat rodents. This took a long time too.
Did you have access to chicks or
No,
okay.
I didn't at the time. That was not a thing, really. Honestly, a long time ago, people were like, "Yeah, we breed chicks to feed your reptiles." It's like, no, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
I guess I don't remember. I don't know it being like on because Rodent Pro existed 30, 40 years ago.
I would think so, honestly, but they weren't known to me at that time, and I bred my own rodents in the store, and so I guess I didn't need to rely on them for that. But
yeah, I was getting like boxes with cold packs from Rodent Pro.
Frozen, huh?
Yeah, like in 2000 and 2000, 98, 99.
Well, that's cool. That's cool.
I swear. I was a child though, so I could be misremembering, but
it is kind of hard sometimes to think that far back and be like, God, remembering all these things. I'm like, yeah, it's in a galaxy far, far away, right? Yeah.
It's interesting though, you get sucked into like the breeder hype thing that happened. Did you already sell the pet store by then? Like the 2000?
Well, I will say what I think the retail environment did expose me to is I refuse service to people on a pretty regular basis. I'd have people coming in trying to buy a Burmese python, and I had already had 3 over 12 feet long in the store that were rescues, and they'd say, well, I'm going to buy this 10-gallon tank for it, and then I'd be like, listen, man, this is probably not the animal for you. So I think I had already kind of developed this anti-retail or selling of animals, which is, by the way, the worst possible mentality you can have if you're trying to run a pet store, right?
Sure, yeah.
But so I didn't really get sucked into that because I think I was already kind of moving away from it. I was like, gosh, I'm seeing all these people and they're just not prepared for this commitment,
Yeah, it's so fraught. Let's put it that way. Like, I am an adult. They're an adult. I feel like I should want them and expect them to have a pet somewhat successfully. But it turns out you kind of have to interrogate everybody all the time in a way that's not very good for sales.
No, well, and I love it when people are like, "Hey, this is gonna be my first snake," and I'm like, "That's awesome! I'm so excited for you." And I will share basic husbandry or what works for me and what works for this animal with you. So please that you're successful. But and I also understand people's life circumstances change, and they certainly did for me when And coming out of the pet store, I had all these animals that I had to keep for a period of time and try and rehome, and I kept a select few of those for a longer period of time. But it was a ton of work trying to find homes for those animals that I thought would be good.
Mom-and-pop pet stores should still exist?
Or I think it would be amazing if they did. I think that the knowledge for individuals that kind of work in those mom and pop pet stores, it's far superior than the folks at PetSmart and that work in a corporate setting. And that's no dig on them. It's just that.
No, I'll dig them. I will.
I mean, there may be a manager at a corporate PetSmart that has the acquired knowledge that keeps reptiles and amphibians at home, that knows what they're talking about, but by and large, that's not my experience in those environments. And so,
well, that's not like a selection criterion for working there. I worked there, and so managers would be like, "Oh, thank God, you know something about fish," and they would happen to assign you to the fish section, but they didn't know.
Yeah,
because it's not really about knowing about animals; it's about selling stuff. Really, realistically,
yeah, and so I
do you think modern small mom and pop pet stores should be experiential? Because the death of retail is everywhere, right? And I don't know what to do about it. But picking up a live feeder rodent is not something you can Amazon to you.
No.
So there is I
think the only way for that to be successful is if you do something creative and unique, and say you build vivariums for businesses or you build custom enclosures out of your store that you also sell online. I think you have to pair it up with something. I think just existing in that small kind of pet store environment, unless you're in like a major metropolitan area, but like here in Montana, I'm already geographically isolated. And so like you'd have to do something unique. You know, maybe it's not just animals, it's also plants. You know,
I feel like if it was half 70% plants and it was and so there was very general service, but then it provided the resource of live feeders or like frozen goods for people with tanks, like frozen bloodworms or whatever, then like you could serve the community, but you wouldn't really be like needing the traffic flow.
Or if you partnered with breeders that you knew too, that could also provide, you know, kind of limited inventory. And if people wanted more, they could, you know, you could point them in the right direction. I don't know. It's kind of sad for me because there was such a great pet store in my hometown growing up, and that person was so knowledgeable, and they did zero reptiles, amphibians, you know, it was all water. And so, but that was always such an awesome experience for me as a kid going in there and learning. You know, and he had discus and he had African cichlids, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you just don't get that experience anymore. It just doesn't really exist. I don't know. I mean, do you have a small pet store in your hometown where you live now? No.
The nearest small one was an hour away and it closed down. Last year. And it was fine. I don't remember. I didn't go there that much, but like.
Not all small pet stores are great either. You know,
some of them are bad. And I think like when I worked at Petco, like they were like, we're trying to make Petco as vanilla subdivision acceptable as possible. No weird SKUs. No, like they were trying to get rid of like most of the saltwater stuff, like to keep it as like PC as possible. Nothing dies, which is good, right? But like none of the planograms were set up right for those species anyway, so they were going to die if they stayed there too long. But whatever. But like there's, I don't know, I don't know if it's just like nostalgia for like the idea of like this like boutique of mystery where you're like, oh, what's in the store this time? Like, because that used to be kind of cool for me, like where I grew up. You could like, oh, I bought like a boa 1 month, and then like 2 months later an Everglades rat snake, and then 2 months later Candoya, 2 Candoya babies, and then I bought that was cool.
My thing was always like, you know, if I'm traveling or if I went anywhere, I was like, I'm going to try and find the local pet store, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to check it out. And so it was always kind of like a treasure hunt, you know. And that just obviously, and I would say that honestly, like, you know, Morph Market and online sales have kind of replaced that too. People can go on their own treasure hunt at home, you know. They're like, that's what I want, and it's right there, and I'm going to reach out, and then somebody's going to ship it to my door, which is pretty amazing.
Do you think reptile shows should exist? That's my next question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they appear to be a proxy for pet stores, not really Morph Market per se, in my opinion. Morph Market is like separate. Yeah. But maybe there's some overlap, but like they're sort of replacing a mom and pop pet store with something weird. It's in person. Yeah. It's not confusing. It's not sanitized like Petco.
Absolutely. I think they should exist. I think also they should maybe be a little bit more varied, you know, and some of them are bringing plants in, you know, so it's not just all animals, because that interests me too, right? I love plants. And so like, I think it's nice to kind of diversify a little bit. So it's not just that strict kind of platform of table upon table of animal, and maybe it's broken up a little bit. But yeah, I think they absolutely should exist.
Yeah, I think more of them should be even more pet store like, in like an attractive, not smelly way. Like, like no pigs, but yes, fish vendors. Like way more fish vendors. I think that'd be like aesthetic and nice. Way more plant vendors.
Yeah,
and I know it's hard for fish people to come in. They need to know it's worth it, but like,
yeah, and you know, that's, I mean, that's what got me into the pet store, was essentially fish. And I've always loved fish too, but it's its own market. It's its own wheelhouse. It's got its own thing, but it'd be really cool if they could kind of integrate all that together. And, I mean, with the increase in people thinking bioactive and thinking about living vivariums, I think we will see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so, because to me, it's more intriguing than just looking at a table of animals, Not
Yeah,
to
just
say
feel
I
like
don't love that,
the
but
raw aesthetics, it helps.
yeah.
Because like I've definitely seen some fish vendors at reptile shows, but it's not a majority and it's kind of rare. So you'll see like
Mhm.
shrimp, like Neocaridina shrimp
Sure.
and betas and whatever, other live bears, but not like a big setup. Like here's whatever, a trough of koi or something. It's
Yeah.
probably not worth it for them to come, but how do you make it worth it for them?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that most of them probably don't need that market, right? Because they have their own avenues. But yeah, there used to be a show, and I think there still is actually in Spokane. It's called like Northwest Pet.
It's like an all pet show.
Yeah, it was kind of all pet, which was kind of good and bad, right? Because it was kind of weird. You'd have those animals. You're like, what? What?
Yeah, I do a lot of shows where like it's fine. Like I mean, the birds will scream, but whatever. I just don't want to be near pigs. Pigs smell.
Yes, they do.
But I don't mind if it's like, I don't know, whatever. Dormice, European dormice. Like, who cares? Go for it, big dog. Have fun.
Hedgehogs. Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah.
Keep it fun.
That's right.
Did we learn anything about colubrids today?
I don't know if we actually did or not.
Sorry.
But we certainly talked about the market.
Good. Yeah,
and
I think
maybe the evolution. Yeah.
The colubrid market, like right now, is better than it's ever been. If that makes anybody feel good about life.
Yeah, it's they have more attention than they've ever had, I think.
In a good way.
Yes.
Like earnest people who want really to talk about them on the internet are more interested now than ever before.
Yeah.
The usage rate of Morph Market is higher than it's ever been before in terms of like putting colubrids up. So more species are available there. So even though like, I've seen like leopard rat snakes here and there, more of them end up on Morph Market to be bought nationally than ever before, hypothetically. So I think it's a good time, is what I'm saying.
I think so too. I mean, I think the future is bright for colubrids, and seriously, like just the number of species that kind of are getting headlines that never did before that's grown. Yeah. There's that market can continue to grow for a lot of those, I think.
Yeah. Just got to find the fat one that they really want.
That's right.
It's probably going to end up being Nerudia, which is funny because they're so vile when they're wild caught. But when they're captive, they're actually pretty nice. I'm like, I'm looking at their like fat little bodies and I'm like,
I'm sure
pretty sure
you've seen some of the ones from Dark Horse, but I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. You get like a few generations into them, they don't even really look like the same animal,
And they're fat. And they have fat, stupid heads with bug eyes. People love that apparently. So I'm in. All right. Where can somebody message you if they want to buy?
They can message me on Instagram or Morph Market. Elevated Serpents on both accounts, and my Morph Market is linked now to my Instagram, which I'm not the most tech savvy human being on the planet Earth, but I was able to do that. So either way.
Are you shipping now? Is it too cold?
I shipped out this week, even though there was kind of a weather warning in Memphis, but I checked temperatures and it was pretty good. And I used some pretty big heat packs, so they should be fine, even if they get stuck for a day.
Yeah, I skipped it. I was like, I'll ship it next week. Morph Market has definitely been picking up. So
I know, and that shipping component that's been added to Morph Market, that's really kind of genius on their behalf. If you can just kind of do it all in one spot. I typically had used other shipping vendors in the past, and so it's kind of a nice option.
It is cheaper.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thanks Jason, for coming out. Thanks, chat. They were excited about Golden Dragon Exotic Club. Check it out in Oregon whenever you have a chance.
Thank you, Jessica.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.